This regular Medicine Hat City Council meeting is called to order at 6:30 p.m. We will begin with our land acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. We will now have a moment for prayer or reflection. Thank you. Item 5, adoption of previous council meeting minutes. We have the regular meeting of City Council dated September 18th, 2023. Councillor Robbins, you have an omission.
I did, thank you. I'm just going to find it here. I had made an announcement that I had attended a meeting with Minister of Tourism, and I think that the minute should reflect what you added to the discussion was that Councillor Hyder and Mayor Clark were also at that meeting.
Thank you. Any other errors or omissions? Seeing none, we will adopt the minutes as amended. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or amendments? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. Council announcements. Does anyone have a council announcement? I do have one. So just for clarity, with respect to item, in item 10, there's the Comco Energy rate offerings. So what will be happening tonight is first reading. And so there won't be any debate about the first reading, but there will be a public hearing at our next meeting. And we will, as part of the public hearing, we will hear from the public then. And then that's when the bylaw will be debated. Seeing no further councillor announcements, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are 2 items to be received for the corporate record and 2 items to be received for information. Does anyone want to pull any of those items for discussion? No? Okay, so we will need a motion to adopt the consent agenda items as presented.
I can make that motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a seconder to adopt the consent agenda items as presented. We'll vote. That passes unanimously. Next up, we have a delegation who will be making a presentation to council. It is the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede presentation. And the attendees are Ron Edwards, General Manager, Shirley McClellan, Committee Member, Neil Sedlecki, Committee Member, Sedlecki. I apologize. Committee Member David Cox, FWBA Architects, and Kenzie Lefso, Project Engineering Representative. Please come down to the podium. Welcome, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Council, for allowing us to come here and give you our presentation for this evening. First of all, I am Ron Edwards, General Manager of the Medicine Exhibition. And at this time, I would really like to thank our supporters that have come this evening from some of the groups, city groups, as well as some of the business people in the city, as well as our shareholders, of course, and our volunteers. Also, you have heard who will be our presenters. Shirley McClellan is a board committee member and has been along with us for this presentation. Neil Sedlicki, also a past board member and a committee member, and a shareholder of the Medicine Exhibition and Stampede. Kenzie Leifsol with Sunwise Engineering has had a lot to do with the engineering of this project, as well as David Cox with FWBA Architects. So at this time, I thank you, and we'll get on with our presentation. Shirley?
Thanks, Ron. The purpose of this presentation is to request support in the way of funding for a project that will revitalize the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede grandstands and create a comprehensive community facility that will drive further economic impact for our city. Neil's come.
I'll just move that up. Well, good evening, folks. So the question asks, why are we here? The Medicine Exhibition Stampede has identified two major challenges that we are seeking your support with. The first challenge that we'd like to share with you is the state of our grandstands. Right now, our north grandstand has reached the end of its service life. We are told by our engineers that it has 2 to 3 years, and then it'll be unusable and safe for public use. Our south grandstand is in need of a huge modernization. In between both grandstands right now, when you've been out to the exhibition, you know that there's a space in between. That space is a barrier that limits access for those that are attending our events, as well as our workers who are working the events. And a third, that's probably one of the most important one, is that neither grandstand has wheelchair access. And that eliminates a lot of those community members that want to attend our event. Now, the second challenge that we're looking at here that deals with this project deals with our facilities. Right now, well, at present, our facilities can house, on average, either a group of up to 200 or up to a group of 800. And we're missing the most desirable facility, which is the 400 to 500 range. So with this project, we feel that we could build rooms and access centers to enhance and to access that 400 to 500 range. So what's the solution? When we come to solutions with our challenges, we don't always come with a problem. We always try to be solution focused as well. Well, with the project that we're presenting here this evening, we are really hoping that you will be able to help us with replacing that north grandstand. For this, it's quickly not being an option for us. It's becoming a must. We're looking at updating the south grandstand to be with more modern standards, building a connection between both grandstands so that we have easy flow and no barriers in between them. Constructing a commercial kitchen to replace the existing 45-year-old kitchen that is in that facility right now. Creating spaces within the facility that can be rented out, including meeting rooms and large multi-purpose spaces, and expanding the lobby space to accommodate better security purposes. So in short, in supporting this project, it'll provide a solution for the challenges that we, the Medicine Exhibition and Stampede, are facing, but in return, will offer the City of Medicine Hat a comprehensive facility to benefit from it as well. And I'll turn it back to Shirley right now to share those benefits with you.
Thanks, Neil. We believe the benefits of this project are twofold. On one side, you have a benefit to the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede, which requires its facilities to be in strong working order in order to support our events. At present, the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede is one of the largest economic drivers within our community. It brings an annual economic value of more than $15 million in 2019 numbers to the local economy. And this was done according to a report completed by the Sports and Events Council in 2019. On the other side, you have the benefit to the city of Medicine Hat, which includes its governing bodies, its citizens, and its visitors. Investing in a multifunctional space that can accommodate large groups of people opens the doors to growing the volume and frequency of events held in Medicine Hat. Currently, the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede holds an abundance of events each year. This includes the Stampede, of course, but weddings, funerals, night show entertainment, graduations, beef pen shows, rodeos, and much more. The facility also currently partners with local schools to provide educational programming. Creating a more comprehensive agricultural building that is flexible enough to accommodate a broad range of events only furthers the potential to grow the existing events and welcome new ones. This is also timely with the twinning of Highway 3 and the similar renovations that were done at Lethbridge and District Exhibition. We have an opportunity today to position Medicine Hat as a key player in the agricultural corridor, while simultaneously creating new benefits by investing in rental spaces. Our target audience, well, we see a very wide range of visitors from all over the city and beyond. This includes community members, business owners for large trade shows, sports enthusiasts, ranchers and farmers, and youth who are participating in various activities on those grounds throughout the year. Our grounds are for everyone, and it's something that we're very proud of. David?
Good evening, everyone. I get the good part. I get to talk about the architecture for the project and the amenities that are being proposed as a part of this redevelopment for the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede. So the main driver for the project proposed is the removal of the north grandstands. The north grandstands have been confirmed with the structural engineering report to be at the end of their functional service life and do need to be replaced. That has been sort of the incubator for the project proposed here. So you can see with the layout proposed that the new north grandstands is proposed to be constructed to connect Higdon Hall and the south grandstands through the new complex shown in yellow. The grandstands will be updated for stadium seating on both the south and north grandstands, as opposed to the current bench seating, and brought up to current code requirements for capacity and exiting. The capacity increase overall with the construction of the new north grandstands will be to 5,000 seats between the north and south. The project includes the addition of a second floor infill within the existing south grandstand envelope that will accommodate meeting rooms and a lobby, providing access by stair and elevator to the upper levels. A new commercial kitchen is added to serve a wide range of events on the site, and the project makes excellent use of existing space and existing infrastructure. 40% of the overall floor area proposed here is within existing building envelope, which makes the upgrades more sustainable from an environmental perspective, utilizing the existing infrastructure in place, and also helps ensure overall capital costs are managed. Inclusivity and barrier-free accessibility are key highlights to the project that Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede want to achieve with this project. So there is, as a part of the addition, proposed an elevator to provide barrier-free accessibility to all 3 levels of the project, and a series of new barrier-free and inclusive washrooms on all floors as well. Part of that strive for accessibility is the development of a 3rd floor walkway accessible by elevator, which makes the upper level open air grandstands accessible to wheelchair and those with mobility issues as well. The design for the project overall focuses on an updated aesthetic that's clean and modern, with a priority on bright and flexible spaces inside. The renovated facility includes a large lobby, an atrium equipped to facilitate event crowds, enhanced operational security for the exhibition and Stampede, and also to host events such as trade shows. This is a rendering within the proposed lobby and atrium space. There's a certain nostalgia in the aesthetic that we're trying to achieve here with a focus on clean, high modern aesthetics for the interiors. One of the priorities in the design is an abundance of natural light within the spaces, as well as an ability to control that light to serve for the flexibility of different functions. Here you can see a movable partition proposed between the lobby and the multipurpose room to allow for spaces to spill out between the two. Along with the commercial kitchen addition, there's also proposed rental kiosks that would expand food services on the site as well. Within the spaces, there'll be rental opportunities, including a 10,000 square foot multi-purpose space and additional meeting spaces on the main and second floors of the facility that'll utilize movable dividers to provide enhanced flexibility, such as the dividers here between the lobby space and as well to divide the larger multi-purpose space. And again, image rendering within that multi-purpose space, showing the flexibility of rental opportunities. There's sponsorship opportunities provided to encourage philanthropic support for individuals and organizations towards the expansion and the ongoing sustainability for Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede. As well as incorporating a wall within the facility to track the history of Medicine Hat and the impact the exhibition and Stampede has had on the culture of our city. Kenzie?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the implementation and the timeline around this project. So currently, the project was taken to the level of design development by the consulting team. And that's really to develop the overall project cost and make sure we had everything incorporated into the project. So the first order of business would be to, finish working drawings and then engage a construction management company in order to build the project. Depending on when funding is achieved, we could also use a fixed price tender. In any event, it'll be a public option to bid on the project. After that, in that phase, we'll have to secure a development permit. We haven't applied for that, not knowing that we have a project, and get formal TCC approval. We have circulated some preliminary engineering to the TCC group and are aware that there are some electrical constraints around the project. Currently, there is enough power, or there was as of last year. Every other facility like gas, sewer, and water has available capacity for the building. And then secure a building permit and secure the project cost at that level. There's several pieces to the construction on the project. Sequence will depend when the funding is achieved. They're more around the constraints. One of the big problems is site servicing. There's currently an overhead power line that goes in front of the buildings. Ideally, we would remove that before the demolition of the north grandstand and consolidate those services. So because the building is being consolidated with Higdon Hall, the south grandstand, it does mean bringing a single electrical point of service, gas, and also bringing upgraded water to the facility for fire sprinklers. So, we have concerns around public occupancy in the summer around the site, so that'll be one thing we'll have to manage. North grandstand, the atrium, and the multi-purpose room are all sequential construction. There's a 10-month hard date around that as far as when the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede needs the facility open for their major events. So we've taken that into account with getting to an occupant level with our safety systems in place, fire sprinklers, fire alarm, and all the exiting, egress, handrails, everything that goes into that. South Grandstand renovation is also a little bit flexible, but has to be sequenced into that. The constraints there are just really around weather, when we can start precast sealing. Currently, the facility leaks. It's exposed to the elements, and we need to upgrade that. And then there's this south covered deck, which really doesn't have too many constraints, but it does affect the usability of the facility. There's new washrooms in that area that serve the front of the building when the summer show is on. And it does affect the egress out of the south covered deck. Now the fun part. So this budget estimate was based on our design development drawings, which were completed early in this year. The estimate was provided by a cost consultant, KBK Cost Consulting, namely Carl Christensen, who's done several estimates for us over the years. He's had decades of experience in cost consulting. The numbers do include inflation till the spring, to the best of our ability, so it has been indexed. And it's considered a Class 3 cost estimate. So the estimated project budget is $37.3 million. We have a $5.4 million contingency at this point. Shell costs, so that's foundation, structure, exterior enclosure, is $13.4 million. Interiors consist of $5.3 million. That's interior partitions, ceilings, doors, finishes. There's also the seating for the grandstands and that. Services at $7.2 million. That's the interior servicing in the building, so mechanical and electrical systems, upgrading fire sprinkler, like I said, and fire alarm systems, power distribution. And then site and ancillary work at $1.14 million. It's important to note that this project is precast concrete, structural steel, non-combustible. It's going to be here for a long time. It's got energy efficient mechanical systems that are designed for periodic use, like the exhibition in Stampede will see. It's a very different type of building. And I just want to point out there's a great degree of public safety that's coming into this with the sprinklers and fire alarm, as well as the upgraded structure.
So for the funding sources, the provincial government has agreed to provide the same funding to this project as they did to Lethbridge. That split is 40% from the province, 40% from the city, and a 20% in an interest-free loan. The Friends of the Exhibition Foundation have a federal charitable number that they can use to raise money through sponsored walls, sponsored spaces, and various other fundraising activities that they have planned. The City of Medicine Hat is a very crucial part of the success of this project, as the province will not move ahead with their funding portion without the city's commitment. So what is the funding request? Our request to you today is for 40% of the costs associated with this project, which amounts to a total of $14,925,000. We're also asking the city to support an additional 20% in the form of an interest-free loan. All of the funding that's secured for this project will be used to fund the design, the construction, and the successful execution of the project. Neil?
So I guess it turns now to what's the return on the investment. And I think simply put, this opportunity is set to capitalize and support not only the current events, both large and small, that we're hosting, but to move into a market where we, the City of Medicine Hat, and the exhibition Stampede can work together to host more desirable events, sizes, knowing that we have facilities to do it. Now, I'd like to share with you some testimonials that we've been able to gather to support this. Our first one comes from Kevin Schuffelbotham, President and CEO of the Medicine Hat College, and he shares with us, knowing the demand in our region for sports, tourism, and community engagement, we launched a diploma program in sport and event marketing and management in September 2022. Greater collaboration between the Medicine Hat College and the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede, focusing on new spaces, will add value to the community and to our students. Now, a testimonial from Scott Lair, our 2021-22 president of the Medicine Hat District Chamber of Commerce. The current grandstands limit handicapped accessibility, Wi-Fi and AV capabilities, access to washrooms, and more. The construction of a proposed space will allow these issues to be addressed, while also creating great opportunities for development and attraction of tourism events and new residents to Medicine Hat. And finally, from Alicia Ammon, the Executive Director, Medicine Hat Accommodations Association, she shares with us the Medicine Hat Exhibition Stampede's vision of a multi-purpose facility capable of hosting conferences, community events, and large outdoor exhibitions will bring economic and social benefit to our city. Now, we talk about partnerships. Those are testimonials. We talk about partnerships. Who's in the waiting for this? Who will come aboard with us? Who will support this? We have several that we can share with you. First of all, our greatest one will probably be the City of Medicine Hat. We could see your support being upmost. With that, we'd like to also add the Canadian Pro Rodeo Association, the World Professional Chuck Wagon Association, our Medicine Hat schools, our Chamber of Commerce, local business, 4-H, clubs such as baseball, soccer, rugby, tennis, which are already housed, one of our largest catering services, Shooting Star Events, and probably one of the biggest users of our facilities is our funeral homes. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Shirley to share with you what are our next steps.
Well, the next steps simply are this. When funding is achieved for this project, the next steps will be to finish the design and the drawings, construction ready. A public process will take place to bring a contractor in place. The North Grandstand will be demolished following next year's Stampede season. Between August 2024 and June of 2025, the new grandstand will be constructed and made operational for the next Stampede season, and the remainder of the project will be constructed at that time. That concludes the formal part of our presentation. We have some time, I believe, for questions. I know that you have a lot of this material and have had it, and I hope that our presentation has been informative, but any one of us can take questions on this project.
Thank you very much, all of you. Rondi, could I get thank you. Okay, the speakers list is now up. Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. Thank you to all of you for coming forward again. I know that this has not been an easy project to get approval on, and I appreciate the time that you have taken to bring us another draft forward with some revisions. I've made note of that inclusivity, accessibility being a feature in this revision, and I appreciate that. That allows everyone in the city to participate, so that's awesome. I have a list, so hopefully Mayor Clark will give me permission to just keep going.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the 40% plus an additional 20% loan leaves us at about 22,387,500 approximately. Does that sound like I've got the math right? Yes, okay. I'm curious about debts owed currently and how you've managed indebtedness in the past. I'm just curious about how you've handled, repaying loans to other groups in the past.
Sure, Ron can take that.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. So, number one, we have never had a loan in the past. We've been self-sufficient. I will say, I've been there quite a few years, and I would say a lot of the thinking with the organization before myself, you know, they did put money away, put it in a trust fund, and we've survived by using that throughout the year and then replacing it. We got hit pretty hard with two things. COVID was one of the things that we had to dip into that rainy day fund and get us through those 2 years of COVID. The other one was we had one of our facilities, and this doesn't mean to say, and I don't want you to think that all our facilities are like this, because they are in very good shape. But we did have one, main one, that had a very leaky roof. We also, the walls were getting a little thin on the sides, on two sides of it. And so we went out about 3 years ago through COVID to get some costs and to repair that. And just to show you how inflation goes, in the COVID years, it was right around $550,000 to replace the roof as well as the two walls. We finished that project because we had to, because that facility is one that we use year-round for a lot of different events. That facility ended up being $1.2 million. So we did pay for that. We looked for grants. We couldn't get any. We look for grants every day to help fund our projects. And we've been fortunate in the past with provincial grants and federal grants that have helped us along the way. But that was one that we had to bite the bullet on. And so we do still have a little bit of a slush fund. You know what it is. You get our financials every year. And but yes, I hope that answers your question, but we have not had a loan to repay back.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer. Through the chair again. So there are a variety of other buildings on your property. Would you see this particular build be intended to replace the use of, say, the Cypress Center? Well, let's just start with that. I've got another one.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, we need the Cypress Center. The Cypress Center is used for many different reasons. We can bring dirt in and out of that for our spring rodeo, for our bull sales, for our pen shows, and we have two buildings that we can actually do that with that are adjoining. The third adjoining building is the auditorium, which we do very large funerals, graduations of 1,000 people sitting in there. We have a large one coming up here on the weekend. So no, it would not replace it. It would allow us just to formalize some of the events that we do have that we get requests for every day. And one of the things in the presentation was we do go from 200 to 800, and we get a lot of requests in the middle, and we don't have a proper facility for that.
Thank you very much. Do any of the buildings that you have on site regularly sit empty? And do you have a plan for how to utilize this build to better suit vendors so that there's less empty spaces on site?
Right down to our barn facilities where we can house 200 horses at any one time. If anything, those are probably the ones that do sit empty part of our year. We do use them fully 3 times a year. The rest of the facilities on the weekends, we're finding it that are becoming more active all the time. Like last weekend, we had 4 different events all at one time on the Saturday and Sunday. I think this weekend we have 3. This facility, new facility, will allow us to do 2 things. Number one, yes, we need to replace that grandstand. Without the replacement of that, we will not be able to hold some of the major events that we do hold currently and have in the past, like rodeos and night shows. We do sellouts of 4,200 seats. We sell out every year, probably with the rodeo for sure on the Friday night, and some of our night shows do sell out. The underneath, we would be giving up a banquet room of 200 and a concession area. which certainly needs to be modernized because that south grandstand leaks like a sieve. So doing it all, the north grandstand with the seating capacity that we need to be with, the accessibility that we need to have, because I do get a lot of requests, especially in the summertime, like why can't we do this for our handicap, the wheelchair accessibility things. Even getting to the 32nd row, and that's how high we have to go, the older folks just can't get up there. So I see us, and we do have a department of staffing that is always looking to bring in new events into the city of Medicine Hat. And so, yes, we would have to work at that, but we do that every day. So we can just look for different events and different conferences or whatever to be able to hold in that facility. Even, we do a lot of trade shows, as you know, and even the smaller ones we need to modernize. Power-wise, we have a hard time dealing with the power down there in the Cypress Center. This new one would have those capabilities of upgrading the power to be able to hold those type of trade shows.
This is my last question. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for answering all of them so far. This one's fairly quick. Do you see any spaces in Medicine Hat being in direct competition with this new renovation?
Yeah, the city of Medicine Hat is my biggest competition, if you really want to know the truth. I do not, there is not a venue within the city that would have the capabilities outdoors for a grandstand or even indoors for the facilities that we're trying to do. So no, I don't see that.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharps?
If you don't mind, I just want to add one thing to the previous
ahead.
councillor's question. I think the one thing we don't want to miss is the fact that we are going to be a part of the agricultural corridor. And that's where we really truly see new opportunities and where this building is really going to be needed. Agriculture, Lethbridge is going to be considered the hub, but with the twinning of Highway 3, and it's actually going to happen, we see great opportunities here for Medicine Hat, whether it's in processing and various activities, and this building will be an asset to that expansion. Sorry.
No worries, thank you. Councillor Sharps?
Thank you, and thank you for coming. I also have a few questions, and I'll try to make them really quick. But your last statement actually was the precipice of my first question, and that is, if it's going to be in the agricultural corridor, have we talked to our regional partners? Because I do recall the last time the Stampede was here, I had specifically asked if we have talked to Cypress County and Redcliffe and what the ask was and what's the partnership. As you know, we do have a joint agreement as a municipality with them, so it is going to be in a corridor, so are they at the table as well on this?
Okay, it doesn't matter where I go, everybody asks what's the city's involvement going to be? I have made a presentation to Cypress County, yes, and that was a couple of years ago, you're correct. And now, when we find out where the city is participating, I will absolutely be back there looking for some type of participation as well as with them. But that would go to help us with the interest-free loan. I mean, we know we're going to have to pay that back, and we're going to look at all funding avenues to do that, whether it be grants, whether it be participation with something like that. And I'll just touch on one other thing that we did do, and Shirley did talk about it. We did file for and was given or granted it's called the Southeast Alberta Friends of the Fair Society. That money that society is allowed to raise funds and give tax receipts, which we've never been able to do. And also that funding has two criteria. One is to help keep the historic Pioneer Village, and the other one is directed to all funds have to go towards the construction of this and maintenance of this grandstand project. So hopefully when we're out there, we have different fundraising projects that we would like to do, but we have not been able to start them because we weren't sure whether this project was going to go ahead or not. Does that answer your
Well, not really,
Not quite.
kind of. I mean, as you know, Mr. Edwards, I sit on the intermunicipal committee, so it hasn't been on our agenda, which I would really like it to be on our agenda, because I do think this is a regional, it isn't just the city of Medicine Hat. And you're very right, the Stampede has never taken a loan from the city, but there is an incredible amount of property there at a very low lease. So I do see that as a gift in kind. So I want to make sure that we balance that out with the taxpayers' needs. But can you just, I'll just continue with my questions. I just want to make sure I have a really full understanding. If I recall correctly, this amount is not much lower than the original ask when we asked the Stampede Board to go back and redo the numbers and come back to us with a number we can swallow. Is that accurate?
Yes, you asked us to go back, and I'm going to let our engineers talk to you about that one. We did go back. We went to administration group. They asked us to go back and see what we could do by pulling out we'll call it the banquet facility, okay? And I'm going to let them do that, because they are the ones that actually took the engineering, did the costing, and came back with the other answer, okay?
Thank you.
No, it should be on the second page of your estimate. So there is a note under their adjustment. And essentially, the ask was, what does the budget look like if the multipurpose room is removed and all of the second floor meeting rooms? So it would just be shell space at that point. And so the estimated cost reduction, if we were to do that, was $5,339,000.
So a reduction of 5 million? That's the total?
Yes.
Okay. I have to admit, I was kind of hoping for more, I guess, but I'm just laying the cards on the table and my questions on the table.
Of course.
So what happens if we don't agree? So let's just say it's a 5-4 vote against this. Does the province still provide any funding?
My understanding is no. Surely.
I'm going to say it, our MLA's in the audience.
I know he is.
I'm sure you are all aware of that. But one of the reasons that I came on this project to help out was to kind of help them through the maze of working through the provincial government. This is very standard for the government, and they have not changed their mind on it. Lethbridge project is probably in upwards of $80 million. And the same funding, we were able to get the same funding split as they were for our project, but they will not go alone. They want to see the commitment to the city, because you know, the belief is, and we believe it strongly, that this is an asset to the city and for future economic development for the city. That's what the space is there for. And so the provincial government definitely will not proceed with the project if the city doesn't. And I think they have conveyed that to the city in the past, possibly, but it is a fact.
Okay, may I, through the chair? Okay, I just have, I think one more question. Actually, 2 more questions. Have we done anything to raise funds in the past 18 months since the last time the Stampede was in front of us?
Yes, okay, but not a lot.
Okay.
We've tried, we've had our 50-50 draws, we've had silent auctions and things like that. But that's not what's going to get it. What's going to make this pay back to the interest-free loan is exactly what you said. We do need to get out, and we do need to make presentations to places like the county, like some of the towns around us. But there's no use doing that until we know if the city is in. Because the province has told us that. Where is the city? The county has asked us, where is the city? So that's why we're here today. And we will work on that interest-free loan, yes. But we have lots of fundraising ideas, but again, you can't even go, and I'll give you one example. We have a brand wall in this facility, and there's a lot of historic ranchers and farmers that would love to put their brand on that wall. And we can ask them for the money, and we can give them a tax receipt now. but they're not going to give us the money until they know this project's going to go ahead. So, yeah, there's definitely a will to raise that funds, and that's what we do. And I think we've proved that over the years, so.
My last question, and through the chair, but probably to the city manager instead of the presenters, is about a year and a half ago when this was in front of us again, we had talked about the energy requirements, and I know that there was conversation right now that there isn't much to do, but I do believe that I would like some clarification from Managing Director Pancoast, if I could, on the energy requirements up there. Is there, if I recall, the last time we had this conversation, there was another $1 million the city would have to spend to ensure that it was able to go forward. I don't know if that's still accurate. If you could just touch on that, that'd be great.
Managing Director Pancoast?
Thank you. Through the chair, ultimately, it would depend on load information from the new design that they are identifying. We would need to be revisiting, but if I recall, the number you're referring to was the capacity upgrades leading up to the site. There would be additional costs for infrastructure upgrades on site.
Guesstimate, if you recall? Was I right about
In
my?
the ballpark, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair, thank you for taking the time to come and present, Ron and Shirley and the crew. Some of my questions have been asked already, but what I'm looking at, we're looking at 15 million, around 22 million from us, Shirley. And then, just like Councillor Sharp just asked, so then we're looking at infrastructure that has to be brought in there, obviously to the cost of the city. What is the cost then, just, let's say this to the engineers and architects, to make that grandstand safe for the public? Because I've heard that it currently is not meeting standards and code. What would be the cost to just make the grandstand, the north grandstand, safe, or the south, or both, so that you can continue on having rodeos and concerts and things like that?
I can't answer that question right
Okay.
now. So this year is the year that it's up for another engineering review.
Oh, okay.
And there'll be significant upgrades, I would think, to make it work, if it can be made to work again for another year. I'm not a structural engineer, but in speaking with them, they're getting pretty reluctant to start doing more fixes to the wood structure.
Okay.
Just given it's a wooden structure it's really at the end of its life. I think it was built in 1969, 66, if I'm correct. So, well over 50 years old kind of thing, so.
Okay, so then you have an inspection annually. Is that how that goes, Ron? You have an annual inspection for
The last inspection was a 5-year term.
5-year?
Yeah, it'll depend on the engineering assessment this year as to how much it can be stretched out.
Right. And I'm sure everyone in here has been there, and I mean, it's on its last leg. What would be, do we know the cost of just repairing or to making the grandstand up to code so we can keep on with business?
I can only tell you what we spent the last time they came in. We had to do a lot of steel to support the wooden beams that are there. We had to put a lot of steel on each side of them and bolts through them. And that came to a close to estimate of right around the $14,000-15,000 mark. So, yeah, we can spend it again, but I don't know if they'll give us the go-ahead to do that. And if we do that, just remember the liability in that sitting underneath that wooden grandstand. I think there's just a lot more than just steel beams to support that thing. Just the lighting alone, the fire codes that we have, our lighting, we had a poor, I will say that the fire department did come and talk to me after our night shows. We can turn the lights on after the night show is over, but people going up and down those steps during the night show, the lighting is very, very poor and it's unsafe. And so that was one of the things. I think I got a call 2 or 3 times to come and screw a step together because it had come apart that evening. So, yeah, the engineers can come in and they can structurally make it a little bit stronger. But it's a lot of the little things that we would have to do to make it safe.
I'm just trying to, the price tag for everything is a lot. I'm just trying to think of things how you could make it work in the meantime, and how we could support you in the meantime. I'm not saying, and I know, Ron, once you start something, it's just like a renovation in your house. You start one thing, it has to be done. But just if we could look at the cost of, just so that you could keep on with business and rectifying the grandstands at first, that was just an idea I was thinking of. But I understand, once you start things, you're ripping off a Band-Aid, right? I appreciate your time here tonight, guys. If there's anything else,
Thank you.
Yeah.
And remember, that's the north grandstand that has to
Yeah.
come down. The south grandstand is in terrible condition. I mean, it leaks so bad that we're always repainting, new carpeting underneath in that multi-purpose room that we use. And so it's gonna need and in this here, it's just needs to be reskinned. Calgary Stampede has a concrete grandstand. They reskin every 25 years. That grandstand was built in 1979 and we haven't touched it. So you can imagine how bad it does leak as well. So it does need lots of tender loving care as well.
Was there just a follow-up, Mayor Clark? Was there just no ongoing upkeep with the facility, or did it just,
I won't say that. I've been in this position for a couple of years, and I know the very first year we spent $15,000 crack filling just to try and prevent the moisture from coming in over the winter time, but that's not going to do it. We need to reskin it. And if we're going to reskin it, then you have to take all those benches off, and then we might as well get back into the stadium seating, and
Yeah.
then you know where it goes from there. So,
yeah, thanks, Ron.
okay, thank you.
Counselor Dumanowski?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to the presenters this evening. I admit that your enthusiasm and optimism for this project is contagious. I observe that, and I think a lot of people in our community do. So, Your Worship, before I proceed, we're strictly asking questions right now. We're not making statements or opinions, or can we mix those? Where are we at?
Such a good question. I think generally with presenters, it's mostly a question. I think if I will request that potentially City Manager Mitchell or Managing Director Stouth, my understanding is that we'll just be receiving the presentation and then a briefing note will come forward from administration to have a debate about it, but commentary
Okay.
outside of that is.
Thank you for clarifying. So I guess start with a question around the project. I know, Mr. Cox, you obviously have spoken to and stated end of functional service life of the facility, or the stands, the north stands is upon us. Some of the follow-up questions, I guess, partially answered my question, but if 3 years' time goes by and there's no significant remedy identified, and the big remedy is a replacement, quite frankly, but if it's not, I'm hearing you say that likely it will be deemed unsafe and no longer viable from the standpoint of utilization. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. So I'm not a structural engineer either, but in reviewing the structural engineer's report, it has only been certified for occupancy till the end of next season. And at that point, we don't have any assurance that it would be certified again. So it would need to go back to the engineers to conduct another review at that time.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question would be around the costing. I know there's estimates there, and Mr. Edwards, you spoke to the costing being a little bit dated. I'm wondering, and the contingencies, which is always a big part of any project, but I'm wondering if what provision for costing has been taken into consideration since your original estimation. You mentioned something, or someone mentioned a fixed tender of some sort. Maybe can you just explain that and how you can ensure highly inflationary environment like we're experiencing right now, that costs could be reasonably contained within those parameters?
We do rely on our cost consultant for that. So this estimate is dated in the sense that the design was finished the beginning of this year. But the cost consultant has carried a line right below the total construction estimate, which includes the inflation at 4.5%. 1.5%, those are for the periods that have elapsed, and then projected 3% to the early second quarter of 2024. So they use Hanscom cost dating in the construction industry to determine that. So it's a variety of factors that go into that.
Okay, thank you. If I could, Your Worship. So we're all aware, and maybe some of us more so than others, but can you speak to the Lethbridge partnership that was struck between the city and the province and other private partnership? Obviously, the costing that you've put out today is a signal of what your project and scope of change will cost. Just ballpark comparison to what Lethbridge did and their costs. Now, that was some time ago, so if you could just share that so we have the public educated to that as much as we are reminded.
I was. Yes, they have a pretty nice Taj Mahal. I was there for the grand opening. It started off with the $70 million project. It's a convention center only. It doesn't have a grandstand attached to it. It has a lot of nice meeting rooms. It has a very, very large convention room. Lethbridge is a different exhibition. They're going in, I would say, a little bit of a different direction than we are. I think we're more general in the fair industry and the things that we do and the events that we hold, and yet we do hold a lot of weddings and funerals like we've been told. It was a $70 million project. It was, again, divided up 40-40-20, and there was a question asked earlier if the province would go a little higher, and our ask to you was a little less, and they absolutely said no. They wanted to do the Lethbridge formula, because you can be assured I have tried. I've talked to a lot of ministers in the past 2.5 years, and this is where we're at today. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it began at $70 million.
I appreciate that. I think the point I was trying to drive is that there was a participation by the city and a commitment, and the province and the private sector, albeit their scope being different. It did take all the partners at the table to make that project go ahead. My last question or point was around the economic impact, and I know whether it's the co-op place or another facility that the city currently owns, or in your case, the exhibition grounds and all the events you hold are, certainly the economic impact to the sustainability of your organization is real, but it also has, I guess, that secondary impact to the broader community, which is obviously why you're asking for partnership. My quick point here is I can't think of, in all my years of living in this city, how many multiple times a year I'm on those grounds for some purpose, some reason. And you've attested to many of those reasons. There's probably no one in this gallery or in this community who would feel dissimilar to that. There's so many opportunities to participate. Largely, what I feel is lost in this whole conversation is that it's about the Stampede for a few days in the summer, and that to me is not entirely factual, in the sense that there are many different ways that facility is used and would have a benefit to your organization and your sustainability, but also the economic tourism for Medicine Hat and area. The $15 million impact that you had spoken to, no one can leave this room without feeling impressed by that. And certainly I imagine what the opportunities would be once a new facility were built. But I'll end by saying, I know there's a cost and factor here, and certainly it's not insignificant, but when we talk about growth and we talk about opportunities for development and getting investment opportunities in a community like this, we have to be seen to be at the table and partners with organizations like the Exhibition and Stampede Group. You probably can guess where I am on this issue, and we're not debating that yet, but I do certainly look forward to the opportunities for you, as you said, to speak to other regional partners. I think that is an important piece that maybe is momentarily lost in this conversation is our neighboring communities and what they can do. They've been at the table with other projects over the years, and I'm certain they will do the same here. But I'm looking forward to the next steps, which is why you're here today. So thank you for your presentation today.
Okay, thank you. I just will expand just on one thing. You're right, our summer fair is 4, 5, 7 days of the year. The other 360 days or 358 days of the year, it is business. We do approximately 700, we call them event days, 700 to 800 event days a year. And that means like this weekend, we have 3 to 4 events going on. I think there's 2 weddings, a funeral, and whatever else, farmer's market. So we are busy. And the facilities, yeah, we're keeping them going as they are today. And there is a time that we need to refit, and the time is now. And the province has come to the table to help us. We just are asking for the city, so thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. So, Mr. Edwards, you talked a little bit about community support, and you referenced a few organizations in the community that have shared their support for this build. But you also mentioned that you are, in essence, in direct competition with the city itself, as well as we have, I guess, kind of an internally saturated events market here in the community. Have you done much research or environmental scan exterior to the city to see what kind of demand there would be to come and bring events to Medicine Hat, whether it be from the southwest of Saskatchewan or in this corner, the southeast corner? Is there new opportunity for bringing organizations or events in that are not available to you now?
We do look at those events all the time because for us it's revenue. Now I can tell you, I can give you one example which we're very pleased to have. There's one moving from Lethbridge to Medicine Hat. It's the John Deere Service School. It starts in January. They're going to move in between Christmas and New Year's. Lethbridge has had it for the last 10 or 15 years, and they are coming here because of our facility and because of our pricing and because I believe the service that we can give them. So yes, we look at that all the time. I mean, we have to, it's our revenue. And I think our staff looks outside the box, like what can we bring that's different into Medicine Hat? How can we compete with Calgary and this brand new beautiful convention center in Lethbridge? Well, we can because we can give service. We believe we have the price tag that would allow us to do things a little cheaper than they are. And I look at our past. Our reputation is golden. And yeah, we can make the odd mistake, but on a daily basis, I think we do a pretty good job of bringing economic impact into this community. $15 million was in 2019. I've had businesses in this city all my life, and I certainly believe we're closer to the $20 million mark. So without those events, I think there'd be a lot of business people that would be hurting. But yeah, I go on our past reputation. We would continue to look for new revenues in events and projects that we could do.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I know I've heard it before as a liaison for the Exhibition and Stampede Board, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate the passion that everybody has for this. The one question that I think people might be sitting and asking themselves is you talk 40-40 split, and then there's this 20% that you've earmarked as yours, but the city to give an interest for your loan. I'm curious if you've done any math on what it would cost the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede to service that 20% yourselves. Is that something that you've considered as a possibility? And if so, what are you looking at as far as what that would cost to service that debt?
Well, I'll go right back to the original, the original ask, and that's what the Lethbridge project was. And we followed along those guidelines. And if we were to take an interest loan out, I believe that might, with the fluctuating interest rates that they have today, I don't know where it'll be. And so I would not think that the shareholders want to put themselves into that position. We've never been in that position before. Not to say we couldn't do it. I'm just saying that would be something that we'd really have to take a serious look at. We, in the organization, I think with our shareholders and our volunteers that we have, putting them into debt might be something like that might be to their demise. I believe that the fundraising that we have on an interest-free loan would go towards that. There's so many things that we can do. Naming rights. We've never got into that. You have. It's there, a sponsorship. That would pay down that loan. And I am not done with believe me, with the counties. We did make a presentation to them, you're right. I know there's an agreement between the county, I think Redcliffe, and I'm not sure who the third one is, but we would definitely be at their doorstep. And I think they need to be in as well, because they do have citizens that use our facilities.
Thank you.
Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for coming back, and for all of you. I have a couple of observations, and I think if there's a point where this council wants our administration to do further work on it, I'm hoping that what I'm saying will sort of help the Stampede board sort of make some advocacy about things that I'm curious about, and I know you won't have the answers to these questions off the top of your head. First of all, I'll tell you a little story. I grew up mostly in Prince George. We don't have stampedes in BC. When I was a little kid, we had lumberjack competitions, which are fascinating. I suggest you go to one. They're really fun, but not nearly as fun as a stampede. So the first stampede I ever attended was in Medicine Hat, and so I have a bit of a nostalgia about it, I suppose. Obviously, the Stampede has had a long legacy as part of the culture of Medicine Hat, and so I'm a big supporter of everything that you do and enjoy attending. I also appreciate the fact that you've advocated with the government of Alberta and you've created a partnership there and have long-term partnerships with the City of Medicine Hat. I think those all bode well. You're not an unknown quantity to us or to the government of Alberta, and I think it's important to note that. We're also dealing with aging facilities, which were some of them built in those types of partnerships. So I think we all have a really keen awareness of how you can end up with a facility that needs fixing at multi-million dollars. That's not news to us here. So that's my background. The economic impact is intriguing to me, that $15, $20 million. And what I'm hoping for in further discussions, if council goes that way, is how Lethbridge has impacted, what their operational costs are, how they've gone up, and how they're managing those operational costs. And I know you're not going to have the answer to that question. I had been hoping for a market study or something that would show how the space could be utilized, but I will say I appreciate that those kind of studies cost money, and you don't want to go down that road without something from us. But I am very curious about Lethbridge and their operational funding and how they're securing that and keeping above water, or if they're successful. And I don't think we'll know because their building is still fairly new, maybe for a little bit, but it continues to be a question in my head. I am very excited about the presentation about the actual architecture and the inclusion and accessibility. I recognize what you're saying. My little children can skip up and down those stairs many times. Not me, not so much. Others with sore knees, maybe not so much. So I really appreciate that that's a big part of the project, and it is necessary in this time. And I also liked hearing that it's planned for the long term, like the security. This is not something that's going to last 20 years and then you'll be back. It'll be a long term. So those are the types of things. It's not a real question in any of what I'm saying, but things that I'd like to sort of project forward as you have further discussions about the project and what it may look like. And I think touching on some of those points would really help me make a decision. Thank you.
I can speak A little bit. Number one, just so you know, I was the chairman of Free Entertainment. We've had a lumberjack show 3 times on our grounds and enjoyed it very much.
They
And I
are
think
really
it
fun.
was definitely from BC.
Yeah.
Because it was the BC lumberjack show.
Yeah, that's super.
The Lethbridge exhibition, I was there. I saw the grand opening. Ours is totally different. They put all their eggs in one basket. That's my belief. And I think ours is definitely scattered in different events that we do hold for different community groups. Whereas I think they're going one direction. And when I talked to the manager down there, we've had a few conversations. He is looking at international customers, and he's going to have to compete with Calgary. We don't compete in that era at all. We do draw a lot, as you know, from Saskatchewan areas, and we do advertise our events into Saskatchewan, and we do southeast Alberta around Medicine Hat. The other thing that has been said, and it's been certainly said of me, and I'd like to clarify a little bit, is they say, oh, you have too much passion. I love that word passion. The Medicine Exhibition Stampede would not be where it's at today. If those forefathers, the people before me, they had passion. And that's where we are today, so.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship. So again, appreciate the presentation. Absolutely, it's intriguing of where we're headed as far as the needs. And I guess I wouldn't be a banker without asking banking questions and more specific about the numbers. So I wanted to kind of hone in on the real costs so that they're on the record. So 14.9 million-ish plus roughly a $7.5 million interest-free loan, which, by the way, for council, even synthesized at 6% interest annually is $450,000. So put that to 500,000 plus. Councillor Sharp's indicated that there's 500,000 given in lieu of rent, plus offsite of $1 million. Becomes quite a total, and I appreciate the fact that no loans were taken prior, but when you guys go hard. So the question I had, and I would probably ask this in normal terms, and you alluded to it a little bit, and first I want to ask the amortization of the loan. So how long are you contemplating having this interest-free loan?
Okay, I guess that would be open for discussion as long as you give it to us. The longer you give it to us, the less we have to pay.
Well, but understanding that, so you talk about passion, and it's funny, I've had the conversation about passion, it goes both sides. I'm very passionate to make sure we as a council ensure that we make investments of the taxpayer dollars prudently. So I need to drive that passion as well. So I'm all joking aside, I need to understand what's the debt serviceability of the Stampede to be able to pay for those loans, because is it 450,000 opportunity cost lost because that 450 interest-free means we pay for it? Is that over 20 years, 30 years? And then if you crunch the numbers, that's a tidy sum of money.
It is, and I appreciate that question, and you're right, it is. And if it's a 25-year loan, I guess that's what we have to work on. I also will reflect back on the fact, and I remember this conversation actually with you, that our lease is for 50 years. That's one of the things that the city has really participated in giving us that land. It's very much appreciated. But we also bring in $20 million or $15 million a year. And I think that's from volunteers that run the organization and 15 to 18 staff members that I have. So, yeah, maybe one year we can pay more back, and the other year it might be less. But it will be a commitment because we don't do anything without fulfilling our commitments.
No, and I appreciate that. And as one that used to be a volunteer myself, I certainly appreciate the contributions. I'm just, in my role, we need to understand full transparency when it comes to the cost. So that's what I'm trying to drive towards. And here's my next thoughts. We've got a grandstand that needs replacement and a comprehensive community facility. So we've got a grandstand replacement and a new venture called a comprehensive community facility. So that, we don't have an understanding as of yet on a phased approach what that would look like if you split the projects into two, the cost of what the grandstand would be versus the comprehensive community facility. So I'll leave that there for a second to ruminate on. But I also draw my thoughts towards the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede enterprise when it comes to CapEx for the existing facility. So what I mean by that is, where are we at on facility repairs? What else is in the next 5 to 10 years? You indicate the South Grandstand. That hasn't been even talked about yet as far as the dollar figure that, and who's the funding source from that? So
That's all part of the, it's all
Okay.
part of the project.
No, like, my question is though, about the rest of the facility, I'm worried about where are we at the next 5, 10 years for the rest of the Stampede, and is there money put aside for the facilities in that regard? So what I'm saying is there gonna be this facility being done and built, and then soon after, if we don't have funds put aside for future repairs or demolition / rebuild of existing facilities, I just need to understand that.
The only thing I can tell you is our facilities are in generally pretty good shape. We just spent 1.2 million on that pavilion for the roof and walls. I won't tell you that the field house is 20 years old, 20-something years old, and that it won't need a roof in the near, maybe 5 to 10 year future. We apply for grants all the time. I have a grant applied for right now for $1 million, and that is for maintenance on facilities, and that's how we've been able to operate over the years with good, I would say, bookkeeping, as well as, there's no doubt, we use the grants every time we can get one. And so that's how we operate. And I think, again, I have to go back to our track record. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I can't predict the future. Our facilities, our barn facilities are in good shape. Our Pioneer Village and Carriage House is in excellent condition. We add to it every year. It's booked solid from the middle of May till the middle of October on Saturday nights. And our Cypress Center, well, you know, the traffic is in there. It's just, I just finished putting on 2 dog shows in the pavilion, and I've got a funeral this weekend in the auditorium. So, like I said, we have 700 or 800 event days. Those facilities do take maintenance. I just lost a big heater fan, I think at the expense of about $15,000 to repair it. But that's just part of operations, and that's what we do. And we look for grants to try and help us along the way, and we do get them from time to time, and that's how we've been able to exist. I don't know how to answer I hope that answers your question.
It does somewhat. I
And I
guess,
respect your question, I really do. I know where you're coming from, and you should look after the best interest of the city.
yeah,
So-
because if you fast forward a bit and then add in, you add 10 years, now you've got capital expenditures on this new facility as well. That just doesn't sit, needs to have tender loving care on it. Of course, you're gonna want it to maintain it to a high level. So I'm just trying to understand, as we grow, and I mean that literally, as the city grows alongside with you, is there projections laid out when it comes to, okay, what does that look like going forward on maintenance? What does that look like for the operation? When we're gonna ask you to repay 7.5 million on a whatever term that makes sense, is that carrying cost gonna, because I don't want, going back to your point on 50 years on the lease, I want the the Medicine Exhibition and Stampede to continue on for the next 200 years. So I don't want to saddle a situation upon the exhibition that is untenable. So I just kind of need to understand the specifics of it to see that you guys are going to be okay.
Well, I guess I can only go by our track record, and I think we've done a pretty good job in the last 100 years. And I hope to be here another 100 years as well, not me personally or you, but the organization. And it takes partnerships to do it. We can't do it alone, and we haven't done it alone. We've had some great partnerships with even the city. Right now, we have two partnerships that we have renew every year. So all I can tell you is we can only do the best that we can possibly do. No different than what you're doing sitting behind that desk. We can only try our best. And we have done that in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you. My questions maybe are a little in line with where Councillor Hirsch was going. So if we were, giving a loan, we would want to have a business plan that looks at, what your costs are going to be, how much more staff you're going to need, and how many events and what revenue you need to make on each of those events to make ends meet. Have you guys done that?
We have done a business plan on it, and that performance changes just like everything else, even though the cost of this project has changed. And yes, we've done a business performance. And yes, it was to look at, number one, what would we gain by the revenue that we do each year, and how would that impact our daily operations? Have we done a business plan to pay back the 20%? All I can tell you is we've looked at it, and we have projects and ideas and presentations to make and grants to try and get to pay that back. But we also have to raise funds through our events, and we are there to make money, not to break even. And that's what's kept us going, and that's what's also kept us being able to put a little bit of money away every year. So as I say, you get our financials each year, and so you pretty well know where we stand there.
I don't think we get them, but somebody
It's in the lease, you
does.
should get them. And if you haven't, I'll make sure you do, because that's part of our lease agreement.
I assume someone at the city does. I don't think I've seen them. So in terms of the business plan and the loan, the thing that makes me a little nervous is that the loan repayment wouldn't be based on your revenue. It would be based on things that like grants or things that might happen, rather than things that you're projecting that actually will happen with the new facility, the revenue that you'll be making off of the new facility. You mentioned that a number of groups were interested in partnering once this was built, and you mentioned tennis and baseball and a few other things. Is that specific to the new facility?
No, that is just part of the partnerships that we are dealing with right now, and that's part of the revenue that we go after. But they are partnerships with us. Minor soccer, baseball, tennis clubs. There's quite a few out there.
And that would more so be in the Cypress Center.
That's correct.
So what is the relationship between the city and the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede with respect to the Cypress Center?
Well, the city of Medicine Hat built the Cypress Center for us, or I'm sorry, not the Cypress Center, the Field House, 20-some years ago, and they leased it for 20 years, and they operated and ran it. We supervised it and maintained it. And that 20-year, that was a 10-year and a 10-year lease and agreement, and then another 10 years. It faded out last year, was the last year that the city was involved in participating with that. This year, we've been all on our own. The city, as you know, got so many days out of the year, and we got so many days. It was a shared partnership, sharing the utilities, sharing the insurance, sharing the parking lot maintenance, things like that. It was a really good partnership. I won't hide any fact that I have been in conversations with the Director of Parks and Recreation, because they did a great job of scheduling, and we're doing it now, and I hate it. But it's something that we have to do. It's part of our business, and but I will say you did a better job than we are.
Thank you. Do you know how much of your revenue is made up by revenue from the field house and the Cypress Center, like the building that's in the parking lot, kind of away from, like all of that, those buildings?
Well, we run about a $4 million revenue campaign on a yearly basis. How much is coming right out of the Cypress Center? I'd have to go back and take a look at that because, you know, our events, our summer fair realizes about half of our revenue throughout the year, and the other half is derived from our events that we do throughout the year. So I'd have to go back and see what the field house actually does for revenue.
Thank you. And have you provided someone at the city with a copy of the business plan? Is that the thing that we saw last year?
I think you have a version right now that was made for this presentation. I have provided lots of copies to the city over the last 2 years of the full drawings from our engineers and architects.
Sorry, I was speaking more to like the revenue projections and the cost projections and that kind of thing.
That definitely was in, I think, our first part, but I have not given that lately, no.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, and I don't see any further speakers. I will just add that, like all of us, we, have an interest in making success here, and people enjoy the facilities, people use the facilities, and we want to find something that works, I'm sure, but it is a lot of money in a very difficult time, so it's not an easy decision. City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you through the chair. Just to sum up, we appreciate your presentation, and staff will be bringing forward a briefing note. Probably not at the meeting in the 16th. It might be the first meeting in November, but we will touch base and let you know. Understanding that time is of the essence. Thank you.
If I may say in the
Yes.
closing then, thank you, Mayor Clark. I would just like to thank you all for listening. I know it's a lot of money. I don't take it lightly, and we don't take it lightly. The organization has been here a long time, and we will continue to work away at existing here. I would like to thank our supporters that came out tonight, a lot of business people, a lot of the shareholders and volunteers that are in our organization. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions, and I hope we've answered them to your satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item 10, new business. 10.1, Comco energy rate offerings, electricity bylaw 4796 to amend the electric utility bylaw. We do have a presentation to explain what the offering is. And then we will look for a motion to give first reading to the bylaw after the presentation. Go ahead. Managing Director Pancoast.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, colleagues, and members of public. Turning to the next slide, as noted, it is a bit unusual to give a presentation at first reading, but given the level of interest in this topic, we thought it would be helpful to offer a summary at this point. We are also planning a slightly extended version as an opening into the public hearing on the October 16th, should council choose to pass the first reading tonight. So turning to a reminder of the direction provided by council, on September 5th, City Council approved a recommendation directing staff to deliver a utility bylaw amendment for council's consideration that establishes interim electricity rates based on best of market prices available in the province for the first council meeting in October. And of course, that's why we're here this evening. You'll recall on the next slide that this is one part of a three-part solution. The immediate portion was a decision supported by council to provide cost pressure relief in the form of a package where utility ratepayers should be seeing the relief on their utility bills dated September 18th and later. And skipping to the long-term portion, council also has approved that staff proceed with a third-party review of our Comco business. And that is really to ensure that we're delivering the best value from our assets. And that review will also inform future rate decision making, and in particular, consider the cost plus approach and implications of that, as well as other options, including continuing with a market-based approach. So tonight, we're here focusing on that yellow circled portion, the interim approach, which is really council's direction to provide best of market approach on an interim basis while we pursue the work to get to the long term for an informed approach. Further context to characterize our focus for this evening and with this draft bylaw update, I'll focus your attention to the graphic. In order for us to deliver electricity into your homes and businesses, there's really three components. One is the generation of electricity itself at our plants, which really is the GenCo business, as we describe it, a piece of the Comco business. We also then distribute it across poles and wires, really described as our DISCO business or the distribution utility services. And then there is the interface component in setting rates, the billing, and those are elements of the retail portion. I'll highlight that the utility charges that cover the distribution costs are already on a cost-plus basis. So we take the operating, the maintenance, the labor, the administration, as well as an amortized effect of our capital costs, and we recover that plus a small allowable return across our load. And that mimics the regulated approach that we see across our counterparts. The generation and retail portions, on the other hand, need to recover their costs, typically by competing in the cyclical commodity market. And that is an approach that the City of Medicine Hat has chosen to pursue since 2009. And that's in part because our input costs, natural gas, we purchase 100% of our natural gas for electric generation from the market. And of course, the export portion of our sales is also sold into the market. So there is a very high tie to the commodity markets for that side of the business. And consistent with council direction, it is that commodity or energy portion of the rates that we're focused on this evening. So what we heard when considering best of market. To respond to council's ask, we considered the breadth of feedback across customers and general public, and that focused on three themes. There's a preference for getting the best rate rather than having choice, given complexity concerns. Customers also indicated a reluctance to lock in to longer-term contracts, even only as long as a year, for fear of getting it wrong. And there's significant angst on affordability concerns for the high-priced months that we've seen in the RRO default approach, even when those high-priced months are typically expected to be offset by the lower-priced months. We do see seasonality typically in electricity where it's the summer and the winter months that are typically higher priced, and that what we call the shoulder seasons, the spring and the fall, that are usually lower priced from there. So with that information, we set some guiding principles when assessing how to proceed. And we did set 4 of them that we used as working principles. One is best of market, another aligned with market, stability, and interim status. With respect to best of market, we really felt that it was important to identify a value that would be generally reflective of the lowest electric energy rate amongst large retailers within a product category. And what I mean by that is comparing like products, so whether it was the variable product or the 1-year product or the 3-year product as an example. With respect to aligning with market, this was recognizing that some of the challenge in what we've gone through recently, we had set an 8-cent rate in Q3 of 2021 as part of our budgeting process. And that did not keep up with material shifts in the market. Really, those contracts rolled off a year and a half later in June of 2023. And over that time period, there was a significant increase in price, and that meant large rate shock for customers and significant opportunity cost on behalf of the business. Stability really is reflecting a desire to move away from those large price swings, those highs in July where we saw 30 cents as an example. The ability to withstand those is definitely harder, even though they should be offset with lower shoulder season pricing. And then the interim status, because this is a short-term approach, while we do some homework to determine the longer-term philosophy of our Comco business, we felt that looking at a product that was aligned with an interim period or roughly a year compared to a 3 or 5 year approach would be appropriate. That brings us to the proposed approach that we've included in the draft bylaw amendment. And essentially, I think I had alluded to Council when we spoke about this earlier, that we may look at, for instance, a 1-year product across the major retailers. When we did that, we identified that our current fixed rate approach is already lower than what we're seeing on the 1-year product from the retailers. So instead, we started there, but we went further. We kept the 12-month focus to reflect that interim period, but also to drive stability from the averaging effect over a 12-month period. And we propose within the bylaw that it's a 12-month volume-weighted average that would be reset quarterly and would be a single rate for customers, excluding the large commercial and industrial. And so I'll walk through some of the benefits for why we are proposing that. We are proposing because the stability is achieved by looking at a 12-month period rather than the seasonality of high months and low months. It is the averaging effect over a 12-month period. We are able to confirm that customers wouldn't need to worry about choice, nor would they need to lock into a contract, because this would be the best rate. And it would also be based on wholesale rate, where we get to avoid further retail price, which is probably why we see similar large retailer equivalent products being higher cost, because they do add additional charges and fees on top of wholesale market. And it would reflect that broader market outlook in terms of being founded on a 1-year product, but would retain a tie to the market by resetting quarterly. So even though we would be looking out across a 12-month forecast, we would determine that as the rate for a 3-month period, but then 3 months later, we would look at the subsequent 12-month period from wholesale market prices and reset it, and that would become the new rate. We see this as a best balanced approach to meet the asks of our customers, the direction from Council for a best of market rate, while still retaining a tie to market for the benefit of the business until we can revisit our commodity business philosophy. Thus, it's recommended through Admin Committee to Council that City Council approves first reading this evening of amending Bylaw 4796, and subsequently after a non-statutory public hearing anticipated at next Council on October 16th, that City Council approve second and third reading of amending Bylaw 4796, with such amendments reflecting the recommended wholesale market rate approach as the best of market interim rate. And with that, Your Worship, I'll turn it back to you.
What does this mean? Like the wholesale market rate, what does that look like?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mayor Clark. Essentially, when retailers don't have to generate their own electricity. So typically what they'll do is they'll look to the wholesale market, and there is a market that is established. We've identified here the ICE exchange that we could look to the wholesale market. retailers would look to that market, purchase what they believe they need for future sales from that market, layer on their retail fees and charges of operating and delivering those prices and that service to customers. So it would be wholesale plus retail. And what we're suggesting is we would avoid the retail and focus on the wholesale price based on where the forward outlook is in a actively traded market.
Okay, but for example, like over the last 5 months or so, like how would the rate be different? How would the rate have been different if we would have used this approach or had been using this approach?
In terms of the level, Your Worship? The price itself?
The price.
So it would have been somewhat similar to our annual fixed rate product. The benefit going forward is that we do fully expect to see weakness going forward in the market. And even today, we did reset our October fixed rate contract, and it came in at 11.68 cents compared to previous months where it's been as high as 17 cents. So the market is showing some weakness, and we would expect that weakness to continue through this interim period. So for instance, if this was to be approved through council through the 3-reading process, current estimate for a November 1st effective date would be in the order of 10 to 11 cents.
Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, and through the chair, Managing Director Pankos. In our council packages, we received a bar graph of projected interim electric rate options with a number of lines in them, and I'm not sure if we're able to show that on the screen, but you prepared it or somebody prepared it. So I'm hoping you could just, it's got some explanatory notes to it, but I thought it was a good graphic to sort of explain what you're talking about. I wonder if you could, I'm not sure we can project that, but if you could just talk about that particular, it's on page 20 of 113 for anyone who wanted to go online and look at it.
Yes, thank you for that question, and that is something that we will include in our extended presentation prior to the public hearing. That being said, essentially what we did was we looked at the forward wholesale market from middle of September, so it's slightly dated, and looked at if we were to set this new rate based on the then forward 12-month period, that is where the number would align. And if we were to then look 3 months later and that same forward market outlook still existed, it would fall further to a lower level, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's shown in there compared to what we see at that time, a couple of weeks ago, from the large retail group, which is that higher bar. And I will also advise that we have Manager Tuchar here as well in case there's specific questions. I may turn to him as well.
Sure, so thank you so much for getting that graphic up so quickly. That's very helpful. So the gray line is what you're proposing we avoid by this bylaw.
Correct. So the gray line is what we saw as the annual product that was listed by the major retailers, and unfortunately there's only 2 major retailers for the annual product. And at that time, when we prepared this graph, it was at that 16-cent range. And alternatively, if we were to look at the wholesale market forecast, which is the blue graph, you see some seasonality where through the winter periods it's higher, through the spring periods it's a bit lower before coming back up a bit in the summer period. Taking the average of that 12-month period would get us to that first 10 to 11 cents, and then taking the subsequent 12 months. And again, this will adjust before we actually set the price, but it would fall further because the forward market outlook, particularly wholesale, is showing declining price through time.
Okay, so you mentioned the gray line is only 2 retailers offering 1 year, and there's retailers offering multiple year contracts. Is there a reason why you're not proposing that in the bylaw that you could share with us?
Yes, thank you for the question. Essentially, we're trying to reflect that this is an interim period that we're trying to bridge until we have the homework done that can inform what we do over the longer term period. The Comco third-party review that we've been asked to complete. So this is reflecting the fact that over the course of the next year, 18 months, however long that might take, that this is an interim period, so we should reflect the timeframe of a product of that approximate length. We could certainly look at longer term, but even as we had a look earlier today, and even the 3 and 5 year products are, our current approach would beat that type of pricing. That, of course, is dynamic. We're not going to be able to control what that looks like. But on the theory that they look at the wholesale market and then layer in their retail fees on top of that, we're confident that the wholesale prices and basing our product off wholesale prices will be able to beat what we're seeing in the retail market.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to have more questions, but I'm going to wait for the bigger presentation so that I make sure I really understand the nuances, but that really does help me a lot. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. As much as this is a tough conversation to have, I actually love this because I, for one, have been pleading for education both at around the council table and for the citizens. You know, it's funny, I've been a hatter most of my life, and I'm like one of those guys that just open up my utility bill and know it's X amount of dollars and you just kind of pay it. And now we've upended that apple cart and we said, hey, and we pulled back the curtain and said, this is a very dynamic, complicated, commodity-driven business that we're in. And I think now really citizens of Medicine Hat are trying to wrap their head around it. And it is tough. You know, you've got councillors around the table that are looking at you earnestly and trying to understand as well. So I appreciate any more education we can do, I think is valuable, totally valuable to the conversation. So that's great. I'm carrying forward a conversation that I had. I went to an event at Higdon Hall one time. And, you know, one of the questions that got fielded to me, and I told them I was going to take it away, is that a lot of citizens were surprised that we didn't own, that we still, or what, that we don't use our own gas anymore. So can you speak to the point when we switched to purchase rather than provide ourselves? What date was that? And I know the rationale, so I'm trying to understand kind of when that occurred, just for education piece.
That's a great question. Thank you for that question through the chair. I actually don't have the date. I don't know if Manager Tuksher does or even Councillor Tumanowski. It was certainly before my time. I've been here roughly 6 years.
I know it's a stumper. I get it. Like if somehow I can eventually get the answer, because I think it's just a lot of people were just absolutely stunned that we didn't provide our own gas to the fund.
But I will certainly share that.
Appreciate that.
Of the gas that we supply for our electric generation, it is high pressure gas, and we purchase 100% high pressure gas off the market. And of what we have left locally to support even our heating distribution is roughly 10% of our heating needs.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think just to being out there in the public domain for them to get a little bit more updated in terms of where we're at. But the other question I had, and I think I already know the answer, but I think, again, this is an important conversation. We're still talking about the ability for us to sell off to the grid as well. Can you highlight a little bit of the new players and the new actors in that world? And I'm thinking renewables, wind, solar, et cetera. Do they have precedence over us? Like when there's an ask, when the ASO says or the province says, hey, we need more power, do we get kind of jumped in the queue? Do we lose our priority? Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Sure. Thank you for the question through the chair. That's actually something that is a big concern regionally. We are facing transmission congestion. So imagine a whole bunch, just like road congestion, a whole bunch of people trying to get through the same location to get to a longer destination. With the significant renewable energy build out around us, the transmission lines to get our export power to the load centers like Calgary and Edmonton, we're struggling to do that. And when there is congestion, typically the ISO, the Alberta Electric System Operator, will look at the merit curve as to how we're bidding our costs into the market to determine who should be dispatched off. But there is so much supply, and I will share that renewable energy typically, because their input cost is zero, they price their bids into the market at zero. That doesn't mean they receive zero. It doesn't mean that we receive zero. It's there's a clearing price at the broader market level, so that even if they've bid in zero, they'll receive the clearing price when they produce. Same as us, we'll bid in a marginal cost approach based on fuel costs, but then receive what the clearing price is at the broader electric market level. And today, we are seeing significantly more congestion, and there are times that we are being asked to reduce our exports, even when it would be profitable for us to export. So that is a concern that the broader ISO is looking to try to mitigate, but they don't have the solution yet.
And then just one further one, if you don't mind, and I appreciate, it's important, not necessarily to what's in front of us, but I think the whole discussion in general about future revenues for the city of Medicine Hat in this regard. So if we know that there's new actors and players that could potentially limit the amount of revenue, AKA profit, AKA whatever we can generate off, not necessarily Hatter's utility bills, but to the grid. That foreseeably what you're saying is questioned. And then the further question I had, is there an element of political risk where ASO could say, you know what, we should be pulling off renewable because it's the right thing to do, and therefore now we even lose, politically speaking, because it's a nice story where we're natural gas fed, and is that in play as well? Is that a consideration or a worry wart for you as well when it comes to that sort of scenario?
Through the chair, those are certainly questions that I have top of mind as part of the broader COMCO review. We are certainly concerned about energy transition and what that means for our COMCO business in particular, the need to drive towards net zero electricity by 2035 based on federal requirements. Clearly, the province is looking to delay that wherever possible, but the ability for us to continue generating revenues on the basis of a requirement to get to net zero is a concern, whether we can physically achieve that through mitigation technology or diversification. But certainly the other piece is the market element with respect to our exports. Our goal certainly would be to achieve clean, reliable, and cost-competitive supply of electricity locally. And if we can't do that, we'll need to make sure that we find avenues to protect our customers.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you, and through the chair, first, Managing Director Pankos, thank you so much. I know that there's so much speculation out there, and I think your presentation actually eliminated some of the rumors that were out there. So, I mean, it's easy when we're sitting around the table and we're always having these conversations to know this. So I think that maybe, we do need to do more of this because it was very helpful. And I know that, I have really heard that a lot. Well, we have our own gas. What are you doing? What do you mean? So, I mean, and I don't think people really did know that. But that wasn't my question. I was wondering, I realize we're not in a hearing yet, but under alternative options, we have 1, 2, and 3. One of them was status quo. 2 was option 2 lowest. And then number 3 was adjustment to remove the RO rate adder from the existing or new default rate that is otherwise intended to collect for the rate cap that was implemented by the province for January to March of 2023. Can we dumb that down, please?
Yes, certainly, through the chair. What we're talking about is in January, February, March, the RRO average prices were in the 30-cent range, and the province had opted to introduce a cap where essentially they lowered that 30-ish price down to 13.5 cents. But typically, in past examples, the province might have kept the generators whole on what they would have seen in market prices. In this case, it was a different approach where whatever opportunity cost there was or missing money from selling at 30 cents versus the 13.5 cents, They were allowed to look at the remaining 9 months of the year and determine how much to add to the RRO price through that remaining 9-month period to recover what they would have lost over Q1. And that is what that rate adder would be.
And if I'm correct, Q1, we took quite a loss as well, between the 8 cents and the.
Correct.
And I mean, I did bring that up, but if you wouldn't mind just touching on that one more time, because I really do think the facts are so important here. We did touch on that, I think, 2 open meetings ago where I brought up the Q1 loss, and I hate to ask you if you wouldn't mind just doing that one more time and explain how we kept it at 8 cents, but what happened throughout that quarter.
And I'll have to defer to my colleagues whether it was a net loss. What was probably being referred to as an opportunity cost, which is more about versus what the bylaw approach of determining market reference rate compared to what the 13.5 cents required rate would have been through the province applying that to our default rate. But I see some squirming over here, so I'll turn it over to Manager Tuchscherer.
Manager Tuchscherer.
Sorry, I don't have that number handy. Our L drive is down right now, but it's approximately 9 cents is the average of that RO price that we would have received over top of the 8 cents. So obviously those are all contract customers that were on the 8 cents, and then the remaining amount of the contracts, our customers were on the RO price or the default price.
Oh, go ahead. I think the question was the loss on the, like, how much do we have left to collect through the adder?
Sorry, if you're talking the adder on the default, as of December this year, we expect to have $4 million left to recover. We add approximately 1 cent kilowatt hour. And just a small correction, we collect that back over 21 months. The first 3 months was the cap, and then 21 months is a 2-year program.
Thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Through your worship, thank you, Managing Director Panicos, for coming with the report this afternoon or evening. I'm certain that many people are eyes wide open and interest, eager, quite frankly, to hear where we're going to go. Again, this is first reading, so there isn't debate on a final decision. But I guess with the information brought before us and kind of the language around best market being used as the kind of the basis for the presentation, I'm just trying to understand, first of all, how the open market revenue, so we're talking about, and again, we have in the past used it as lost opportunity, or not, we didn't take a loss, we just unrealized revenue or lost opportunity revenue. How does that play into any of the best market approach that you're looking at? Again, the rolling year, 1 year average, reset every quarter, et cetera. I think I get it. But how does that play into it? So I guess my point is, will that play into it? Because as we've experienced, and that was a source of I guess, joy and frustration on the part of the public, the ratepayer, one and the same, because on the one hand, we were able to say that we were on track, or we were creating opportunities on revenue that unlike any other year that I can certainly recall, and yet we had established rates. So discounting the fact that we're going to a best market approach, a new calculation, will that added revenue opportunity play at all into those, into that rate setting?
Through the chair, if I'm understanding your question correctly, how are we thinking about the lost opportunity between current approach versus the interim approach?
Just to focus, so we're gonna look at that rolling year average. We're gonna reset quarterly. Within that set rate setting, will we look at opportunities that we've realized in real time on the open market? For example, we're making good revenue to even further reduce, I guess is what the average ratepayer would want, to further reduce or artificially reduce it even more so because we are enjoying revenues that were unanticipated. I guess on the flip side, if we had costs that were not supportive of our rate setting or best market analogy, would we skew our rate upwards slightly to make up some of that potential loss, if that makes sense? So I'm looking at the extremes in the best rate setting formula. Does that play at all into this, or is that outside of this best rate setting formula?
Through the chair, if I'm understanding your question correctly, really this approach is still keeping us tied to the market. So the business is still taking market risk, good and bad, through both high cycle commodity cycles and low commodity cycles, with the extra element that we are now taking the lower end of our best in market rate by taking a wholesale approach for our main customer group. So if market prices continue to trend low as they are forecast to do, it is very possible that if that was to persist, we would be in a cash negative environment. That is a risk we take today. It's just now sharpened because this would be taking the low market approach or best in market approach. But that in itself is part of the tie to market that we have historically pursued, where we have to keep our pencils sharp to remain as competitive as possible, to withstand the lows, benefit from the highs, put that away from the rainy day to help withstand the lows the next time. So it is that commodity cycle, the market risk that we take today. Does that answer your question?
It does. May I continue? So I guess just on that same point, but I guess a little bit different, is the, and we looked at, I think it was page 20, that chart that Councillor Robbins referred to, and you had indicated in there are some of the peaks and lows are predicated on shoulder seasons or obviously projected rates, but notwithstanding the fact that we can anticipate certain patterns within the environment based on the load and the peaks that go with that. I'm wondering if there's any, are we going to use any of that or is part of our best rate analogy or methodology, does it take into consideration that we are, even though the market is suggesting in that particular quarter that we're establishing in that rolling 12-month average, that it is going to be at a certain rate, but we know that our cost of purchasing the gas, which you said was 100% of the high pressure gas, how does that play into our establishing a price? Because on the one hand, we're buying it off the market, but on the other hand, we're using gas 100% to produce our energy, and that may, in a very short period of time, challenge us in a favorable or unfavorable way, if that makes sense. In other words, are we looking at the peaks within that rolling average? Even though we have a rolling average and we're setting it quarterly, are we going to use the peak or the volumes within those peaks to trim or establish part of that best rate setting?
Thank you for the question. So we are proposing that the best of market approach using the wholesale forward 12-month outlook is load adjusted. So looking at whether we consume more in the summer, more in the winter, we would create a percentage of load through a 12-month period, and we would weight the 12-month outlook. But ultimately, whether we're profitable or not profitable won't change the answer for what the best of market rate would be. That is a risk that we would bear, and something that historically we've been pretty focused on, that if we can't withstand those commodity cycles such that our cost structure is higher than what we can see long-term in the market, then it would be better for our customers if we actually got out of the business at that point.
Okay, so thank you. I like the words load adjusted. I think that says it all. And I appreciate that that was part of the conversation. I just wanted to be sure. Last thing is, just to make it very clear who's catching or participating and tuning in, the contracts that people signed up for, where are they left in this whole plan? I know you've alluded to it, or it's been part of the conversation. Can you speak to that one more time? And then I have one quick parting comment.
Yes, thank you for the question through the chair. With respect to existing contracts, whether they're variable contracts or fixed rate contracts, what we have built into the draft bylaw is that this new best of market rate would become the new default for all applicable customers. And we've made that assumption simply because we expect the new rate to be lower than what the past market highs have been for existing contracts. That being said, we don't want to remove choice altogether. So those customers who are in an existing contract, fixed or variable, they would have the choice within a 30-day time period to opt back into their contract for the duration until their contract term would expire. But we're otherwise assuming that it would be in the best interest of customers to simply move directly into the new default rate.
Well, you answered that really well. I like the idea of, because I know I've had people ask about, well, what if the new rate isn't as sharp as what I've signed into, but they can opt in and out. I like that during that duration of that contract period, correct?
They
Did
could opt to
out?
retain their existing contract until that existing contract expires,
I see,
is what
to-
we have
to
built into
retain.
the draft
Okay.
bylaw.
Okay, and parting comment, I know there was some musings around, and certainly I've been here a while, but the Northeast Field, as Medicine Hat is known for all hell for a basement, is a depleting reserve. That was the founding of what we were known to and currently known as the Gas City. And obviously as those depleting reserves have diminished, that relationship and that purchasing off the market has changed. I would be recalling off the top of my head, but I think when I first came here, it was 50 to 60% of our gas was what we were buying off the market. So that was significant, but obviously that has shifted in 20-some years. But it's indicative of what's happening elsewhere. This isn't a made in Medicine Hat problem or solution. It's certainly bigger than that, but I do appreciate the presentation so far today and look forward to the public participation in 2 weeks.
Councillor Knodel as first speaker, you will be next.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. So my curiosity is a bit tangential, but I am curious about regarding the dialogue around our profits in the past meetings this year. Why is it that the use of our profits pays for reclamation projects, but we don't necessarily see it in budgeted on a line item? So why is it these projects get, it's this over and above the profit that I think you understand what I'm saying. I'll stop there.
Yes, through the chair, ARO or abandonment and reclamation obligations, particularly for our natural gas sites, have been budgeted previously. Upwards of 125 million, I believe, was the last budget that had provided a opportunity to pursue a certain set of wells, and that would be over a multi-year period because there would be abandonment of the well itself, and then, of course, several years to ensure appropriate reclamation.
Were you speaking about the electric utility reclamation costs? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you for the question. Historically, we haven't identified what the abandonment of those assets would be because it was understood that we should be able to continue changing out the engines and hot sections and doing appropriate maintenance, that we would be able to continue with an extended life of our generation assets. It's with the introduction of the environmental requirements to get to net zero that we are now revisiting that and working on a study to identify and estimate how much the abandonment and reclamation, decommissioning and subsequent reclamation would be for our generation assets.
Last question through the chair. At this point in time, and this is like a big question that you probably don't have the answer to, but at this point in time, the ownership of our utilities is more of a benefit than a liability to the community. Is that correct? Or is that information that will be coming soon?
Yes, historically, through the chair, we do provide an annual dividend back into the city of Medicine Hat for uses across a variety of ways. Going forward, we are working on scenario analysis, particularly with energy transition requirements coming forward with significant uncertainty as to what that would look like. But it is certainly at a level of risk that differs from what we've seen in the past. That being said, all of those sorts of elements is what we would look to see as part of the third-party review for the Comco deep dive.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. And through the chair, I actually just had a quick follow-up question. You just made a comment that if we continue verbatim, not verbatim, but continue down this path, we may as well not be in the business. So currently, we do not pay transmission fees, correct?
Through the chair, we are considered a net-to-grid market participant with respect to the province. And on that basis, we do not pay demand charges or load-based costs for transmission into the city. We do have a bit of a proxy charge that our GenCo assets do provide the reliability. We do build to what we call an N-1, where we have essentially an insurance asset to make sure that if one goes into an outage, we have enough local supply to make up for that loss. So we do have a smaller proxy charge, but yes, we don't pay the provincial demand charges.
And the rest of our fees are cost plus, correct?
On the utility side for distribution, correct. And I will note that with respect to the comment about if we continue down this basis, we should go out of the business. That's if we were to see persistently low market prices that were consistently through time below our cost to produce, then yes, rather than charging our customers higher than market and what they could see elsewhere over a longer term time period, then it would be better for our customers if we were to exit the business.
Right. And if that, let's just say that scenario happened, in that event though, customers like me would now be paying full transmission and everything else that we currently get cost plus would be full.
Correct, because in that scenario, if we did go out of the business, we would be exposed to full market prices at a retail level, including import-export charges. Hopefully, we're able to avoid that through time, and we're strategic in how we approach energy transition and are able to protect the benefit that customers do have today.
Thank you, Managing Director.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, thank you very much for your presentation. Much appreciated. Thank you, Manager Tewksher.
I move that council gives first reading to bylaw 4796, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the electric utility bylaw.
I'll second.
All right, so being first reading, there will be no debate, and we will vote on first reading. That passes unanimously, and just as a reminder, there will be a public hearing on this matter on October 16th at our regular council meeting. Moving on to item 10.2, we have a procedure bylaw amendment, bylaw 4797. Someone needs to make a motion, for first reading.
See, I move the council gives first reading to bylaw 4797, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the procedure bylaw.
I'll second that.
All right, being first reading, there will be no debate, and we will vote on the motion. And that's unanimous.
So I move the council gives second reading to bylaw 4797.
I will second that.
Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion. That is unanimous as well.
So I move the council unanimously consents to consider a third reading of bylaw 4797.
Second.
Any discussion at this time? Seeing none, we'll vote. Unanimous consent.
I move the council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4797, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the procedures bylaw.
Second. Discussion? Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just think before we go to the third reading, it's important for the listener to understand that this bylaw, quite frankly, has been an iteration that council's looked at numerous times. So you might feel like this is kind of procedural, but there's been a lot of work done on this procedure bylaw in the past. So happy to support it. Thank you.
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you, through the chair. And just to follow up on Councillor Hirsch's, this is timelines and housekeeping amendments so that we can make sure we're meeting all our standing committees, and that's what the changes are for. Thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on third reading of bylaw 4797. And that passes unanimously. The next item are two resolutions at item 10.3, resolution of support for 2023-2024 Alberta Community Partnership Grant, Highway 3 Regional Water and Wastewater Concept Development Study Project.
Being I'm the representative for Highway 3, Your Worship, Twinning, I'd like to speak to this. This resolution is two separate resolutions, so I'll start with the first one. Whereas the government of Alberta wishes to develop the corridor along Highway 3 between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat as a global hub for agri-food processing facilities, and as a project stakeholder for the development of the Highway 3 corridor, the City of Medicine Hat is looking forward to this initiative and developing our region as a place for innovation, investment, and supporting businesses in the agricultural food industry. I move that Council supports the Town of Coaldale's submission of 2023-2024 Alberta Community Partnership Grant application in support of the Regional Water Concept Development Study Project, understanding that there is no matching contribution required.
I will second that motion.
Discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Your Worship. Resolution number 2, whereas the government of Alberta wishes to develop the corridor along Highway number 3 between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat as a global hub for agri-food processing facilities, and as a project stakeholder for the development of the Highway 3 corridor, the City of Medicine Hat is looking forward to this initiative in developing our region as a place for innovation, investment, and supporting businesses in the agricultural food industry. Sounds repetitive. I move that Council supports the Town of Tabor's submission of a 2023-2024 Alberta Community Partnership Grant application in support of the Regional Wastewater Concept Development Study Project, understanding that there is no matching contribution required.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That is unanimous. Item 10.4 is proposed review of unsightly property bylaw. This was put forward as a notice of motion last meeting by Councillor Sharps. Councillor Sharps, I guess we'll have to make the motion first.
Thank you, no problem. I move that council directs administration to conduct a review of bylaw 3117, the unsightly property bylaw pertaining to vacant and derelict properties, and take appropriate and immediate measures to address this pressing issue and to report back to council with options to enhance the effectiveness of the bylaw and identify any gaps or shortcomings that may hinder its enforcement.
I'll second.
Councillor Sharps, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would very much like to speak to the motion. So I've got a little summary written here, but really it's a quick summary. The prevalence of the vacant and derelict properties within the municipality. And I used to say the downtown core, but this afternoon I was invited up to Taylor to look at a derelict property right in the middle of a beautiful residential area. And you know what? I don't get up to that part of town very often, and I was blown away. This house had a fire in November. It's all boarded up. There is a pond in the back that had koi fish. This pond is, I leaned over the fence and took pictures. So this pond is 8 feet deep with a bunch of dead koi fish. It's boarded, I would not be happy living next door, and this was in Taylor. So I went on a rant about being downtown. I know Councillor McGrogan's been nailed quite a bit with some downtown homeowners, as have I, and I walk downtown every day, and I was like looking at some of these places, and I'm like, okay, what do we do different? So then I went and read the bylaw, and I'm like, truthfully, I just felt like it was weak, and not weak as an administration. Please don't take that as an offense, administration. It was weak for us to be able to, number one, enforce, or number two, once we enforce it, what are we doing? Other than giving them a ticket. So I was inspired by a Winnipeg councillor. I would love to take credit, but it wasn't me. A Winnipeg councillor took this back to City Council and said, okay, it's an epidemic across Canada. What are we gonna do different? And I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do, but it was very interesting what he proposed, and I do believe it passed, was in essence for the bylaw officer to be able to give so if a call came in, the bylaw officer would be able to go down, make a determination, provide a ticket or give a ticket, and within 30 days, if they had to go back to that location and provide another ticket, it went back to the director of planning to make a decision forthwith to demolish the property at the owner's expense. Now, I realize that's certainly assertive. I'm not saying that's the answer, but I'm not on administration, so I'm just putting it forward to see if we could have a better conversation about that. And if I could just finish the rest of my psychobabble here. I believe that if we conduct this review and implement any revisions, we can ensure that our community is protected from the detrimental effects of vacant and derelict properties, thus fostering a safer and more vibrant environment for all our residents. So, okay, that's it.
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you through the chair. And one thing, when Councillor Sharps brought this to my attention, I did a little cursory deep dive, and what I found was a bit concerning to me. There are a lot of outstanding derelict properties on the derelict property list. So with council direction, I would like to, yes, look at the bylaw, but I think there might be a process problem where I think it may be spread over several departments, therefore not necessarily being a lead department, and I'd like to be able to investigate that too, so we can find out where the stopgaps are and correct those at the same time we're addressing the bylaw.
I have a question for City Solicitor Bullock. What we can do with respect to unsightly and nuisance properties is in the MGA, so that's legislated. We, for reasons, I guess, sometimes put stuff that's in the MGA in our own bylaws as well. What are the differences between what the MGA says we can do and that process and what is in our own unsightly property bylaw?
Through the chair. I don't know if there is a difference. We basically include in the bylaw the powers that are in the MGA for issuing orders. So under the bylaw, if a property is deemed to be unsightly, bylaw officers have the authority to issue cleanup orders, fix-up orders. If those aren't complied with, the city does have the right to go in and carry out the terms of the order, and those costs can be added to the tax roll for the property. It also allows for tickets to be issued for failing to comply with those types of orders. So it really just mirrors what's in the MGA.
Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. So having some familiarity with the unsightly properties bylaw in my past world, I agree we do need to look at it. We need to demonstrate to our community that we see that there's a problem, that we are going to look for more effective ways to deal with it. I obviously have to follow the MGA. And I don't know what steps we can take above it, but I do support a review of it and support, I walked with a contingency of folks a couple of times in that area, just, I guess, to the directionally challenged, to the west of downtown. And there's some properties that have been sitting vacant for 20-plus years that have been boarded up, and they look awful. And there's people that are trying to live live a peaceful life in their own homes, and they're finding it really difficult. So I support it within the framework of the MGA that we do look at this, and if nothing else, we're sending a message to our police service and our bylaw enforcement folks that we need to have a refreshed look at this as well. So thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Well, Your Worship, just to build on Councillor McGrogan's points, I certainly, I don't think anyone, certainly I won't be against reviewing. I wonder, when I think about that, the house that was identified as one of the issues, and I believe it's in Turner actually, but was based on a fire, and I guess in that specific incident, there is going to be a period of time for insurance companies, et cetera, to play out some of these things. There was a house on Cameron that had a fire, and it sat for many months as well, and I'm sure we can think of other examples over our time. So my first thought was, is this an enforcement issue? Is this a capacity or a depth? Like to what depth or what means can we create a stronger, more robust, unsightly property bylaw? Because my sense is if that were available to us, we would have done it before. But you know what? Looking at it doesn't hurt, and especially in relation to the MGA. I guess overall, I'm wondering what our reach will be, because I know over time, and since history's been thrown in my face today already, I will say many years ago there were the downtown properties that were identified, and there were concerns around what reach council or bylaw had in dealing with those properties, and there was a lot of legal precedents around that, and in many cases it had a limiting factor. So you know what? Let's move that movie forward. Let's look at it. I don't want to give false sense to the public that we'll be able to come back with a more significantly derived bylaw, but you know what? Looking at it certainly under the lens of the MGA and what case law or otherwise is out there, and if we can achieve a more, as I said earlier, a more robust unsightly property bylaw, and we can marry that with our enforcement, that will certainly serve the community in a better way. So I do support the move to at least review it. And I'm wondering, Councillor Sharps, was there any timeline associated with this? Because we all know when, and I know legal's busy and everyone's busy, and I don't know if we send this one outside and get it contract out the work or what, but how do we ensure that it's going to come back in a timeline that fits this mandate of this term, never mind your desire to move this forward in a more quicker fashion?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Dumanowski, and I agree with you. That's a very good question, and maybe put a date on it. However, I do know that legal is incredibly busy, so I'm so open to this being outsourced to another firm for them to come back with best practices. And one of the reasons I just want to say why I want to do this, the last time this bylaw was looked at was 1998. So I know that there's been updates, and I don't know that they are the updates according to this, so I'm not pretending to know that. But every time I read the bylaw, and Chief Murphy actually said this to me once over something else, and I completely agree with him, we can't arrest our way out of these situations. We need bylaws that are enforceable, that the city can work with bylaw, with the police, and that we have a community approach to this, because it can't just be one department that does this. So having said that, I don't want to say anything and get daggers from City Solicitor Bullock, but I'm wondering if December is too soon for you? Or at the very least, first meeting in December to come back with, that you're going to send it out? But ultimately, personally, I would like this, we're going into the winter months, so it's going to be a little bit harder, but I would like it back. If possible, if anybody thinks I'm being too nice, let me know, but I'm thinking end of Q1 of 2024.
So,
Yes, please.
yeah, so I think there's really two things that, because like we can already do all the things in the MGA, whether the bylaw says we can or not. And that is a very specific process. So I think that, I'm not sure it's a bylaw issue. I think it's an enforcement and process issue, and that part might take a little longer. Go
So,
ahead.
The reason I say it's, in my mind it is number 15 of this bylaw, enforcement of this bylaw. The city is not required to enforce this bylaw. In deciding whether to enforce this bylaw, the city may take into account any practical concerns, including available municipal budget and personnel resources. So I don't think that part is in the MGA, so I would really, I guess if I was a homeowner and I got a ticket, the first thing I would say is, well, why are you guys enforcing it? It clearly says you don't have to enforce it. So that's that whole tighten up thing that I would like to see.
City Manager Mitchell, do you have a comment on the timeline?
I do, and I do, through the chair, I do agree it is two separate issues, but the bylaw does need to be looked at. But I think internally direction to me to make sure that this happens, it's something we are going to be talking about this week, because when I found out the extensiveness of the list and the fact that it's spread out through 4 departments, it was very concerning to me. One of the things is all of these problems factor into something else. So we have very low housing inventory. We have a housing shortage. So we have derelict buildings. So it's a safe community. So to me, this is something rather of urgency. So something we will be looking at. But then if you could put a timeline on the bylaw piece, I do agree with the mayor that it's 2 issues. One, you can give direction to me to make sure the process is looked at and that feedback is brought back in a briefing note to council before the end of the year. And the second piece is to look at the bylaw by Q1. Just my suggestions on timelines.
No, I appreciate that. So can we, Mayor Clark, proceed with this motion and then do a secondary motion?
Yes, we can, or you, like, I don't think this one has to change that much to include both. It's totally up to you, whether you want to do a single motion or 2 motions.
I could use a friendly amendment here if somebody wants to throw some dates in there. Sorry, Councillor Van Dyke seconded.
And you don't think it says it right now?
I don't actually, because there is no
Okay.
date. Councillor Dumanowski actually pointed out it's not a measurable motion that I made, so I think that's prudent. And if I hear the city manager correctly, you're comfortable with me saying December, the first meeting in December, to come back with, thank you.
Would you like to make that motion, Councillor Dumanowski?
Sure, I'll add that to the motion, that it'll come back in December with a briefing note and with the hope, I guess, or do we want to be definitive that a Q1, that the amended or recommendations for amendment would follow up by the end of Q1?
And through the chair, because I want to be respectful of City Solicitor Bullock, if we don't have the internal capacity, we will make sure it gets done. Thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski, just looking to get clarity on the wording, I think, with
I think she's typing quicker than I can think, but the recommendation provided or recommended revision of the bylaw by end of Q1 2024. I think that suffices. I think the intent is there.
So you want the recommendation by the end of Q1 2024 or implementation by the end of Q1 2024?
Well, I think we need to have the recommended revisions, and then we would have to debate and decide and vote on that at that point. But I think this covers it. I don't think anyone here would misunderstand that, although we've done that before. We put it in front of us. So, and the public will hold us to it because they're listening intently.
Do we have a seconder on the amendment?
I would second that.
Okay. So Counselor Hyder, you wanted to speak to the, sorry, we'll vote on the amendment. You want to speak to the amendment? Okay, Counselor McGrogan.
Thank you. It just seems unusual that we put a motion on the floor to have this reviewed. It's an open meeting. Our city manager said, I'll have it done by this date and time. I don't know why we have to include it in a motion. So I'm just throwing that out there, and I don't recall us doing this on any other reviews of any other bylaws. And I just hope that the message isn't that we don't trust that admin will do it if we don't put a timeline in a motion. I just don't know if it's necessary, and I might, I might be wrong, but I just wanted to say that.
I think it just signals the priority so that if there's competing things that this is the priority. Did anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment. That's unanimous. Counselor Hyder, you wanted to speak on the motion.
Sure, I just wanted to, sorry, through the chair, I appreciate Councillor Sharp's bringing this up. I too have been astonished by some of the residents, not even just downtown, but throughout the community. It's hard when people try to keep their home, the lights on and the grass cut and everything looking really, really nice, and your neighbor next door could be vacant, could be, all sorts of activities going on in the house. So I think it's time we really look at that list and we make this a priority for the community. So thank you, Councillor Sharps, for bringing this up.
Counselor Robbins?
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm interested in the review of what action has been taken in the bylaw in the past, let's say, 10 years, what the cost was for the city, and did we ever recoup that through the tax roll? Because part of the reason that I interpret the bylaw saying the city may or may not take action is the cost-related issue. So I'm just, it's all well and good to say we're just gonna get rid of every junky-looking house in Medicine Hat, but that's gonna come at a cost we may never recoup. So I'm just curious to say, what is the last 10 years of history told us about that? Is as part of the review, if that information could be included, I think it would help me a lot. Thank you.
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you, through the chair. Agreed, and I did have a brief conversation with the city solicitor today about that. And there's also the other issue of the, when it gets to the court side too. So we'll make sure that that issue is addressed in the briefing note.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's passed unanimously. Item 11.1, 2025-2026 budget touch points with council. And there is a recommended motion in the agenda.
I'll go for it. I move that council approves scheduling of 2 open council committee of the whole meetings for 2025-26 capital budget deliberations at up to 4 hours each, a total time of 8 hours, from 3 to 7 p.m. between July 1st and July 12th, 2024, as well as 4 open council committee of the whole meetings for 2025-2026 operating and consolidated budget deliberations at up to 4 hours each, total time of 16 hours, from 3 to 7 p.m. between October 21st, 2024 and November 8th, 2024.
I will second that.
Discussion? Counselor Sharps?
Sorry, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this. When I look at the dates of July 1, 2024 to July 12, 2024, that's actually only 8 business days in there because July 1st is a stat. So does that mean in those 8 days, we're going to have 4 meetings between 3 and 7? Because that's a lot of meetings. No, that says for up to 4 meetings each. 4 hours. 4
Say
hours,
4 hours.
from 3 to 7. Still, that's quite a bit. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that, because it is quite a bit, because we have a council meeting on the 2nd. Then 3rd, 4th, and 5th is off, and then, 7, or 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So just, everybody knows, because it is summer, right? So just making sure everybody knows.
What was the impetus behind that particular
Timeline.
timeframe and length of time to schedule the meetings? Managing Director Egert.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, Councillor Sharps. So for July, there's 2 meetings.
She did correct me.
Yeah, and the reason that we are differentiating between capital and operating is we need to first finalize our capital spending in order for us to plan for what the impact is to our operating. So you see a difference in dates from July, 2 meetings for capital, and then between October and November, another 4 meetings for operating and more the consolidated view of the budget.
Yeah, but with respect to the dates in the first bullet, why July instead of June? Why 12 days instead of 30?
So through the chair, the touch points with council actually integrates back into quite a comprehensive planning that we have for the budget process. The time it would take to get our business plans put together for capital, the capital ranking process, time for review and et cetera. So that was the reason for recommending that first week in July.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you, Managing Director. I also want to just point, I was actually going to do both of them, because on the second point, it is actually, I think, 8 days, and one of them is a council meeting, or 2 of them are a council meeting. So just to make sure we understand that in those 12 days, there's going to be 4 additional meetings on top of 2 council meetings. That's going to be really intense scheduling. So I guess to your point, Managing Director, I want to make sure that we have ample time to do this, because it is so important. I'm just wondering if there should be spreading of the dates to include some more time, just in case we can't, because it is, the very first set of dates is summer, and I think the school teachers in the room ditch us pretty quick, so. And then the next one is, again, tight hours. It's 10 days, 12 days, and 4 additional meetings on top of council. So I was just asking to be looked at, that's all. I don't want us to miss any of that opportunity.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Rivers. It feels like I'm just trying to reflect on the last budget route we took, which was kind of an open opportunity for council members to come in, ask questions, but it sounds like that's not the case here. It sounds like it's a required attendance, that we are gonna chat about budget deliberations for that, up to that amount of time, which I get it. And maybe you can help me answer that. Is that the case where it's a kind of a command performance and we're rolling up our sleeves?
Managing Director Egert.
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Hirsch, we did reflect back on our last budget through, we actually did a survey from council members. We got some feedback. We also benchmarked what other cities, mid-sized cities are doing as well. And it is a desire by this council, as well as practice in other municipalities, to have that dedicated time to talk about deliberations. Our goal is to frame each of these meetings to allow council to have the information to allow council to discuss and debate those items that are initiatives for the 25 and 26 budgeting process, whether it's capital, new initiatives, or whether it's new operating initiatives. And each of those are going to be consolidated into a package, if you will. And so council will have the opportunity to discuss and debate those changes in budgets from the last, our 2024, I'll say, into 25 and 26. So that's the intent. If it takes the full 4 hours, we were careful to put in there up to 4 hours. If we're done early, or if we decide we only need 3 and not 4, that's absolutely a decision that council can make.
Councilor Dumanowski.
Through your worship, yeah, I too find it a little bit unusual that we're doing this today. I mean, I don't think there's any hidden agenda here. I mean, if anything, it's very open and overt in our statement here that we wish to stick to some timeline assurances, as you indicated, Managing Director Eager, around the budget, the capital, and the operational. I don't recall seeing this before. However, I guess my only thought was, are we pigeonholing, I can use that term for those who understand it, ourselves, because we're being extremely precise, maybe to our detriment. And so I suppose at the very least we'll achieve a heads-up view of what's coming forward, and we're giving the public the same. From the standpoint of public participation, which is, I believe, why we even went through that whole process last time, I'm never mind getting 9 council members to fit in a very extreme tight timeline. If we want the public to enjoy, and I'll use that word, enjoy the same process and participate, it's going to be much more difficult for them. So, but if we're all game, I guess we go for it. I find it unusual, but I'm not questioning its merit. I think, if anything, I'll end on your point that it does create some timeline assurance, which I think is what we're hoping to achieve through this.
Councilor McGrogan.
Thank you. We were doing a lot the last time we went through this, and I think a lot of it was maybe done in close. So I think we're coming out in the open now. So I think that's part of it. I think what I'm wondering, and if you could remind me, are council being kind of prepped on the big kind of macro projections and numbers before this all happens, so that if, let's say, you decide that you want to double the workforce in your deliberations and come back to council with your numbers, is there going to be some feedback from council about where we think things should land as far as percentages from a big picture, not so much a little one? Thank you.
Managing Director Eager.
Through the chair, Councilor McGrogan, we are planning on coming forward late February with a recommended key budget assumptions that'll drive a lot of the, I'll say the macro, that would include the tax revenue increase, inflation, some of the other costs like labor cost and so forth. So that's going to come early on in February. Also in June, prior to the capital presentations, we'll be coming to council just with a higher overview, more related to the process on what to expect in July and what to expect in November, with the goal of approving this in November, December timeframe. Answer to your question, Councilor McGrogan, yes, we will have an overview of what the macro view of what we're asking council to look at and to deliberate on. And so you'll have a bigger picture in that regard.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. My reflection on the last time we did this, or the last couple of times we did it, in particular last year, it required a lot of time for us to feel confident as a group that we were approving what we wanted to approve. So seeing this come before us makes great sense to me, that we have demonstrated the need for this much time in the past, and to have certainty on staff's part, knowing that we will have allocated time for those discussions, being that we have required it in the past, makes good sense. I think it's a lot of time. It makes me a little bit like, there's a lot of time, but it is required, I suppose. I think that after going through the process once or twice already, kind of 1.5 being that we kind of came right into it in the first year, I would hope that it is not as, I don't want to say a negative word, but as difficult for us to feel confident in approval as it was last year, or even especially the year before. So I'm you know, if we could decide when this time rolls around that it is not required for the 4th meeting or something like that, that would be fine with me. But let's, I'm okay with it. Let's give it a go.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair. I am too a little bit concerned about the tightness of the time, and I'm wondering if council is okay with this, or would we like to just expand it by maybe 5 days either side, if that's okay with Ben, it doesn't throw your schedule off too much, just to allow for, move it back maybe into the last part of June and give us 5 more days on the bottom, just to make sure that we have enough, we can manage everybody's schedule, might be easier.
Or we could just try it, see how it goes, and then change our minds if it doesn't work. No motion? Okay. So we'll vote on, did someone make this motion? Yeah, okay. So we will vote on the motion as presented. That's unanimous. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. My bad, unadjourned. Oh, yep, this is from the ALR committee, item 10.2. 11.2.
I can make this motion on behalf of the ALR committee. I move the council directs administration reach out to all the boards, committees, and commissions to which council appoints public members to ask them to provide their top 5 required skills and competencies from the framework approved by council in January 2023, and any other comments as to what their boards may require for the 2024 appointments only, and the frameworks be developed into a matrix that the administrative and legislative review committee can use to score the applicants.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Councilor McGrogan?
Thank you. Yes, it looks like I kind of nodded off on us there. I do want to say that this was basically our topic of conversation, Open and Admin and Ledger Review Committee, and acknowledging, I guess, the last couple processes when, you know, it's such a tough decision sometimes to make as far as who sits on boards and commissions and who doesn't from the community. And I'm really excited, actually, about the motion that I forgot to put on the floor about the possibility of actually having a little bit of rigor around the decision-making process. It's more defendable. It just makes more sense, and it takes some of the politics out of it. And looking forward to it. So thank you.
Councilor Robbins?
Yeah, and I'll just add that, sorry, through the chair, that part of the conversation was the fact that we had given a framework to all of the boards already, and several of the ones that I sit on had gone through to understand the sort of where their gaps might be. And so that work had already been done by city staff. This was just a matter of now getting some of that information back so we can sort of score and understand what those boards need and not just guess on their behalf. But that has already gone out from city staff.
Councilor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. And speaking in favor of this, I reflect on my time when I was at Medicine College. We actually had a mandate, even geographically, in certain skill sets that needed to be available and evident. So I think the intention is the same here, that, you know, if you kind of think about it, when one committee member exits that potentially had a vast skill set in a particular area, when that person leaves, it can sometimes create a rather large hole that could potentially not be filled. So I'm not saying that this becomes the end-all be-all, that this is going to be, because again, these are just kind of guardrails that we're going to create. Ultimately, it's all of council that kind of decides on, as we know, the appointments to committees. But I think it does enlighten us a little bit and gives us some context in terms of what the committee's needs are. So I'm in favor of this. Thanks.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. And seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned at, I think I'm sure, yes, 9:25.